1,900 scientists and experts, Nobel Prize winners included, signed a declaration that challenges today's green ideas about how rising CO2 levels cause global warming. This organization, going by the name Climate Intelligence, or clintel for short, just put out a document titled World Climate Declaration with the bold headline saying, "There is no climate emergency." I've even been getting some DMs like, "Hey, check this out, independent scientists are calling for a less politicized, more scientific approach to climatology." As now it feels like the whole climate debate is more about personal beliefs than actual science. It's high time we move past this naive belief in half-baked climate models and start focusing on empirical science. Agree, totally agree, ready to sign. So, what kind of empirical evidence does clintel point to? Let's take a look. The main characters in today's episode are spotlighting a huge issue with all those climate forecasts. It's all about the computer models. And these models aren't some magic crystal ball, they're built by humans who put their own assumptions into them right from the start. Now, just so you know, the main go-to source in the climate agenda is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. Every 7 years, they roll out massive reports based on numerous models predicting hotter temperatures, an increase in hot days, heavy rains and agricultural droughts, and even extreme heat if we don't act fast. But here come the clintel rebels. Just a quick reminder, they're those against climate change, and they suggest we ditch the models and just look at the Earth's temperature records as they are. And yeah, over the past 170 years, the planet has warmed up by 1.1 degrees. But take a look here. It's been a roller coaster. First, a warm period, then it cools down, warms up again, takes a pause, and then more warming. How can we be so sure the next 30 years will be just non-stop warming? Okay, even if we take the gloomiest predictions, we're looking at maybe a 1.6 degree increase by 2050. Let's ask ourselves a question. Would this increase actually mean the end of the world? Let's take two cities with entirely different temperatures. One major city is close to the North Pole and the other is near the equator. Oslo and Singapore. Regular measurements indicate that the average temperature difference between them is 22 degrees. So why haven't both beautiful Oslo and futuristic Singapore fallen into disaster? The answer is simple: adaptation. So, there's no need to fear global warming. People will find ways to adapt. And this whole thing about carbon dioxide being the bad guy doesn't hold up when you realize it's actually crucial for biomass growth and has been boosting agricultural yields all over the planet. Over the last 100 years, we've managed to improve our lives significantly through science and tech-driven adaptation. Have a look for yourself. On one hand, you have green politicians shouting about soaring CO2 levels, but on the other, deaths from floods, droughts, storms, fires, and other climate-related disasters have drastically dropped. That's all. Click the like button, share, and subscribe. I mean, that's all the 1,900 clintel scientists have to say on climate change, as outlined on their website and in the PDF file. To be honest, I was expecting a detailed collection of studies and letters from these scientists, but turns out the meat of the content barely takes up a page, followed by a list of signatories. If you found the previous chapter convincing, congrats, it's high time to start looking at things a bit more critically so you won't be easily swayed by manipulation like, check out Singapore and Oslo and suddenly there's no global warming. Now, let's examine clintel's position more closely. and see why it might not be as solid as it appears. Point 1 sounds like it's all cyclical. This argument suggests that the Little Ice Age just ended around 1850, so logically a warming period would follow. But it's not just the fact that the Earth is warming, it's about how fast it's happening. We have not seen warming like this in more than 2,000 years. They love to show this graph to back up the idea of it's all cyclical. It's like we've been having temperature swings over millennia, suggesting a natural cycle of warming, then cooling, and warming, then cooling again. However, they conveniently leave out the corresponding CO2 concentration charts, which show that temperature changes match up with CO2 levels going up and down. And that is why Green parties suggest, let's keep an eye on emissions, as there's been this huge and sudden jump in them recently. Methane's story is pretty much the same. This info came from the Vostok station in Antarctica, gathered right before the 2000s. Those frozen air bubbles trapped in ice cores have given us a sneak peek into Earth's climate history. Point 2. Carbon dioxide isn't that bad, it's actually essential for our planet. Having more CO2 leads to more plant biomass. Well, yeah, it's clear to everyone that there's a need for CO2, and in reality nobody suggests stripping all CO2 from our atmosphere, yet carbon dioxide boosts the greenhouse effect. This is when solar rays get partially trapped in the atmosphere, heating up our Earth. Without the greenhouse effect, Earth would have been 33 degrees colder. That means life as we know it might not have evolved here, so no me and no you watching this video. The issue is that the level of CO2 in the atmosphere has shot up over the decades, a process that used to take thousands of years. Looking at the timeline of millions of years, we've literally fast-forwarded through epochs of carbon dioxide changes in just a few years, landing us in the Miocene era in terms of CO2 levels. An uncontrolled rise in CO2 levels won't end well. That's because carbon dioxide needs to be absorbed somewhere. A bit stays in the atmosphere, some gets taken up by trees, and a portion dissolves into the ocean. And the quick spike in CO2 levels in the ocean doesn't go unnoticed. It's shifting the ocean's pH to be more acidic, and that's impacting all marine life. Point 3. Your climate models are wrong. But the IPCC's findings aren't based solely on models. In their reports, they point out through instrumental measurements over a span of 170 years, they've tracked a stark rise in temperatures, a noticeable spike happening suddenly. And here's the info on the increase of the Earth's temperature by this 1.1 degrees. Interestingly, it should have gone up by 1.5 degrees. But human activities don't just heat up all of a sudden, they also cool down our planet. In this cooling effect, it is aerosols that play a big role. So when you add up all the factors that cause warming and subtract the cooling ones, you end up with a 1.1 degree increase. And if you happen to dislike some of these models, go ahead and point out the specifics that you don't agree with. It's a simplified version of the report that takes 30 pages of infographics. The full report, though, spans thousands of pages and includes citations for all the research and raw data used. It looks like 1,900 scientists didn't do much work and just handed us a page of their assertions saying, "Source, just trust me, bro." But how is it that nearly 2,000 scientists criticized the IPCC but didn't do anything themselves? That's simple. Just take a look at the list of signatories. We were able to identify at least 200 individuals among the signatories with professions like engineers, physicists, musicians, businessmen, medical doctors, and writers. I'm not saying these folks aren't skilled in their areas, but their expertise doesn't really relate to climatology. So, if you're a fitness trainer, for instance, you could go sign the World Climate Declaration. Then the media might just include you in the count of scientists. Now, if you've been following along thinking that everyone backing the green movement is totally noble and only focused on a bright future, then you've got the wrong idea. Check this out. Yeah, CO2 levels are climbing fast, pushing up temperatures and starting things like ocean acidification. And it's all happening at a speed we've never seen before. That's my stance, based on the evidence at hand. But around this issue, a battle rages between two factions, the Greens on one side and the Blacks on the other, each lobbying hard for their slice of the market pie. The Green side says, "Look, we're up against giants like Volkswagen in a divided market. Our best bet? Create a new market by convincing everyone the old ways are destroying the planet. So jump into our electric cars as they're eco-friendly. And if lithium batteries turn out not to be any safer, who's really going to notice? After all, they don't spew any black smoke, you know." And the response from the right side is, "Are you out of your f***ing minds, you soft, whining Zoomers? We built a century-long legacy here. Gas stations, service stations, cars, planes, yachts, steamboats. It's a whole hydrocarbon ecosystem that's only made life better, and it's as reliable as a Swiss watch. What doomsday are you talking about? You're just causing unnecessary panic." There are tons of examples where players from the climate change game have their influence on the market. This often leads to cash moving around between them through things like so-called carbon offset credits. For anyone not familiar, carbon credits basically give companies a green light to release 1 ton of CO2 into the atmosphere. Got a carbon credit? Go ahead and pollute. And if there's some CO2 to emit left on your credit, you can sell it. This system opens doors for potential corruption among companies and governments. Though, in theory, the money is supposed to help offset pollution, for example, by funding greening projects or CO2 capture initiatives. But then it turns out that 39 out of 50 such projects are crap, and the rest of them are either problematic or barely making an impact. In the US, the most problematic project is the world's largest carbon capture and storage plant in Wyoming, which has benefited from generous taxpayer subsidies, but where the vast majority of the captured CO2 has been released into the atmosphere or sold to other fossil fuel companies to help extract hard-to-reach oil, according to the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. The climate change topic is also a fertile ground for scoundrels of all types. I agree with the Clintel group on one thing: the number of deaths from natural disasters has gone down a lot. But it's not because these events are happening less often. Of course not. Based on the IPCC report on observed changes, there's been a rise in heat waves, heavier precipitation, and droughts. Another study supports this by stating that global precipitation levels have gone up. However, looking at the data for the USA, heat waves have actually decreased, marking the only discrepancy with the IPCC's findings. But it does confirm an increase in the hottest days. The number of fires in the USA hasn't changed that much, but the fires have got more extreme, burning more land. The study also highlights a major improvement in reducing deaths from natural disasters, credited to better prediction, stronger infrastructure, and enhanced emergency preparedness and response systems. And there's one more point that's relevant to our topic. Those at low incomes are often the most vulnerable to disaster events. Improving living standards, infrastructure, and response systems in these regions will be key to preventing deaths from natural disasters in the coming decades. Speaking of that, there's another interesting story that really shows the dark and ugly side of green propaganda. A real climatologist, unlike the earlier mentioned group of 1,900 scientists, managed to publish his work in the prestigious journal Nature. However, he had to simplify his findings, omitting key details to present a narrative that global warming is the sole cause of increasing wildfires. So, there's no global warming after all? Hold on a sec, the climatologist isn't denying it. He agrees climate change is real, but he points out that there are other factors at play too. Nowadays, to get your work into prestigious journals, it seems like you have to claim that the only way to save humanity is by cutting down CO2. This leads to a second unspoken rule in writing a successful climate paper. The authors should ignore, or at least downplay, practical actions that can counter the impact of climate change. If deaths due to extreme heat are decreasing and crop yields are increasing, then it stands to reason that we can overcome some major negative effects of climate change. Shouldn't we then study how we have been able to achieve success so that we can facilitate more of it? Of course we should, but studying solutions rather than focusing on problems is simply not going to rouse the public or the press. Besides, many mainstream climate scientists tend to view the whole prospect of, say, using technology to adapt to climate change as wrong-headed. Addressing emissions is the right approach. So the savvy researcher knows to stay away from practical solutions. So the full and complex story goes like this. Global warming does exist, and we are seeing a big jump in greenhouse gases. But Earth isn't going to descend into hell due to human technological advancements and adaptability. Thus, shouldn't we then put more effort into improving prediction and response systems for natural disasters? Perhaps we should think twice before rolling out solutions that majorly shake up the market and might reduce people's welfare just to satisfy certain lobbyists. But then the key players of the green agenda turn to me and say, "Hey dude, listen up, it's not all about the money, and it's not just a Western thing either. China's pushing hard on green tech as well. We all use oil and gas, right? But we weren't all blessed with loads of those resources. Often we have to buy them from countries we don't exactly see eye to eye with. So they've got an upper hand on us. Something goes wrong and they could just easily cut us off, like look at the Ukraine war. Yeah, we said we've ditched Russian hydrocarbons. Sounds great on paper, but reality is different. And this conflict's just another reminder switching to green energy isn't just about saving the planet. It's about energy independence and security. So we're going to try everything to loosen that oil and gas stranglehold, from solar panels to nuclear and even helium-3. We may not give up oil entirely, but every move towards green energy will put us in a better position when it comes to negotiations. Right now we're seeing a clash of market forces that's set to get even more intense. Figuring out if this is about good intentions, misappropriation of budget money, or a quest for energy independence is going to get trickier. But we're going to try to dig deeper each time. We say a big thank you for all our supporters from Patreon. And I'm the researcher.